making a dessert that was never seen anywhere in the world. I'm putting ingredients that usually are for a salad into a dessert. But if I make the tomato sweet, it can work in a dessert. This is a Basil Panna Cotta with tomato jam, mascarpone honey cream, and granulated basil.
It doesn't strike me as a dessert. I'm intrigued. The texture of the panna cotta is sublime, but it's got a savory taste without being sweet. But then the thing explodes with lusciousness, excitement, when you add that tomato jam. Theoretically, it shouldn't work, yet it does. It's wacky, it's delicious, and yeah, you've got me.
Wait a second. How can tomato and basil possibly fit inside a dessert? I've actually been asking myself that same question since 2013 when this episode first aired. By the way, this is what I looked like in 2013 for those of you who may be wondering, and I believe I was 15 years old at the time. This is actually a video of me dancing in front of school as a school project, and I remember spending so much time practicing on this dance routine, wanting to perfect every movement even though I had zero experience in dancing, because it was so exciting to me at the time to try something new and different. And I think that's what partly drew me to this tomato recipe. The idea of using tomatoes, not only in a dessert but in the finals of Masterchef, and actually winning the whole competition.
Congratulations, Luca!
Was so new and exciting to me that this recipe was one of the most memorable moments of Masterchef. But other than tomatoes, what were the other ingredients again?
This is a Basil Panna Cotta with tomato jam, mascarpone honey cream, and granulated basil.
This recipe has 4 elements plus the flowers, which you can optionally include, but I didn't because honestly I have no clue where to even buy that. Okay, enough talking, let's get down to business. First, let's make the basil panna cotta. Add 1.5 teaspoons of gelatin to a few tablespoons of water and set aside. Then heat up 1 cup of cream, half a cup of sugar, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla into a pan on high heat. Mix the mixture to dissolve the sugar, and once it starts simmering, add a handful of basil. You just need to heat up the basil for about 30 seconds, then puree everything into a blender. You really want to extract as much flavor as possible from the basil. Then here you can add a bit more basil to get a brighter green color. Next, pass your basil smoothie through a strainer to get all the flavors without the pulp. While the cream mixture is still hot, add the gelatin to the mixture and stir it to help it dissolve. If it doesn't want to dissolve, like mine, you can microwave it for 30 seconds and that should do the trick. Finally, add in 1 cup of cold milk. Adding cold milk at the end will prevent so many issues. Hot milk tends to form a top layer, which will look bad when it sets, and also tends to separate from the cream. I had to learn this the hard way. Yikes. This is why I add my milk at the end, not at the beginning. Here, I transferred it to a serving plate while pouring slowly to not create any air bubbles. Then I place it in a nice and cozy plastic wrap. And finally, you can go ahead and refrigerate. I'll see you in 4 hours. First part done. Next, tomato jam. Here I measured out 200 grams of canned tomato puree. The original recipe actually uses fresh tomatoes, but it's more expensive in the winter, so it's really up to you. Then I added a 1/4 cup of brown sugar and reduced it down for about 15 minutes. In goes 1 teaspoon of lemon juice towards the end to balance out the sweetness, and the tomato jam should get thick enough that you can shape and mold it. For the mascarpone honey cream, I measured out a 1/4 cup of mascarpone with 1 teaspoon of honey and mixed everything together. Then I placed our cheese in a piping bag, and here's a practice shot of what the presentation will look like. Next, basil sugar. I started by blending 1 cup of basil. Wait, no, that's not gonna work. Instead, I decided to chop them on a cutting board as fine as possible. That's better. Then I placed our basil paste in a bowl and mixed in granulated sugar a few teaspoons at a time until it formed big chunky pale crystals. and last part done. Now that we have all our elements, we still have to wait a few hours for the panna cotta to set in the fridge. Okay, back to work. For the presentation, I basically just tried my best to copy the original. And now for the best part, the taste test. But just one thing to note is that you can see that I left the granulated basil for too long before eating and it melted. So hopefully you can learn from my mistakes and make sure to only put the sugar right before serving. And as for the taste, this dessert was surprisingly good. I think the combination of weird flavors somehow managed to balance each other out, even though no individual flavors worked that well on their own. It was definitely very interesting, but do let us know if you end up trying this recipe and how it turns out for you. Oh, and before I forget, don't forget to enjoy this with a nice bowl.
Wait, you'll ruin it.
Oh, never mind.